Hey people, Mike Martins here with the Mike Martins channel. Thanks for liking, joining, subscribing, and being part of the channel and all that jazz. Well, we're getting rate hikes and rates are starting to go up. Hallelujah, it's finally here. Well, of all countries that are suffering or all countries that are on the hook, it's mainly the English-speaking countries across the Commonwealth or the English-speaking country world that is suffering from this major housing crisis. So we've been connecting the dots across this problem for years now. Oh yeah, we've been here for years talking about this and connecting the dots and warning people. Now, if you live in Canada, even if you rent, looking to buy, you own, looking to sell, looking whatever situation you're in Canada, if you're homeless, you're going to want to watch this because it all ties together. Because every human being has been affected with poor governance in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, all the English-speaking countries. But Canada, the deregulation of the banking system, artificially low Frankenstein interest rates that they were pilot testing to get first-time home buyers to compete with money launderers that come in from China. So that's what was happening, and that's the problem we've been facing here in the West, and that's why there's a mass exodus of our cities, and they're going to tax us to death now. So you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't, if you remember that video from 4 years ago. So what are we talking about here? Here it is, folks. Here it is. Better Dwelling on the money, as usual. Don't forget to check them out at betterdwelling.com. Yeah, just on the money, as usual. So let's see what they have to say here. So, global real estate downturn can kill growth. Canada most vulnerable. Oxford Economics. All right, so it doesn't take an Oxford economic genius to tell you what's going on here. I'll tell you what's going on here and what I've been saying for years. Global real estate is entering a downturn that will kill growth. And it's the worst in Canada. That was the gist of the numbers from Oxford Economics. You can go over to the website. I went to check it out. Today, the macro research firm crunched the numbers on housing as a share of GDP. This is kind of important, okay? And Canada had the highest share. As home sales and building slows, this will leave the economy with the slowest share of growth. This is major important right in the first paragraph right here. Now, what have we been saying? This is very important because this all ties in. Countries using housing to prop GDP market 3 years ago. So there it is right there. We've been already talking about this. You can go to the Channel Time Machine over there and type in GDP. Mortgage debt passes 80% of GDP, economic storm hitting, major tax hikes, and major exodus ahead. So mortgage debt in Canada is growing higher. What else did we say? Canada's GDP is flat, but real estate outperforms. Mass exodus of youth from Canadian cities because they couldn't get into the markets, right? Canadian real estate debt passed 76% of GDP. Mass inflation to hit by 2021. Tax hikes again 4 years ago. So Canada will be in a recession without money laundering. Canada's GDP needs more money laundering. So there you go right there. And this is what we've been talking about. Hot war ahead. China GDP retracting. Print more money, but inflation creeping in fast. 5 years ago. So there it is. Canadian housing, not for Canadians. Toronto penthouse condo sells for $16 million. So again, if you kind of economic downturn ahead. So let's go back to the article here. Global housing slump will kill economic growth everywhere. Oxford Economics sees a global economic slump coming. They blame a negative wealth effect. Yeah, especially when you're not catering to people living in your own country and incomes. Okay, average incomes, average to high, are not tied to real estate prices. That's something we've been talking about here for over 10 years now. Wages not in line with real estate prices. When you can't get people in, what do? Well, they start pulling the tools out of the toolbox. Lowering interest rates. They're even talking about negative rates. Woo! So, falling residential investment and tighter credits. Countries with the largest share of housing investment will see the biggest impact. Canada, of course, and Australia and New Zealand and the UK. Heck, even Ireland. If we rank each economy according to these three factors, the ranks, the most vulnerable economies look to be Canada, Taiwan, Finland, New Zealand, said Adam Slater, the lead economist with the firm. Sorry, guys, I'm reading through the phone here. Canada is the most vulnerable economy due to its real estate addiction and Okay, we'll go look at what we said about that. Canada's more addicted to housing investment than any other country. Residential investment peaked at 9% of GDP from 2020 to 2022. The highest share in the world. In a distant second is Taiwan at 7.6% of GDP, followed by Finland, 7 points, and New Zealand at 7.1%. It's significant when almost $1 in $10 of the economy's output is just sheltering people. That's enormous. And that's something we've been worried. There it is right there, if you guys want to take a look at it. And keep going down. The same monetary policy mistakes were echoed around the world, but not all economies are in a bad place. Notable exceptions to housing dependence are Japan, 3.5% in the US, 4.2% in Italy, 5.1%. Most of the US and most of Japan, and most of Italy, housing is still within reach of wages. So if you work a job full time, okay, you could still live a normal life in a house. Here, housing investment as a share of GDP is below average for the sample. So there it is right there. Well, below pre-GFC peaks, great financial whatever, reset over there, peak levels, and in the case Japan, also lower than 10-year average, said Slater. Canada's combination of highly indebted households and housing investment are a problematic combination as interest rates rise. Households won't be able to continue absorbing home prices as easily. Demand falls until prices drop, having a disproportionate impact on the GDP. Now, the housing is so warped, and we've been exporting housing to investors from overseas, it's actually destroyed. So here it is. What did we say here? 3 years ago, people taking on too much debt, massive debt loads. Wages are disappearing to inflation. Canadians taking on too much debts, the mother of all debt loads. Credit card debt going nuts 3 years ago. Housing, ATM machine, massive defaults ahead. People are taking out on too much debt. And this is something, don't get into debt, it's a trap. Millennials taking on too much debt. So this is something we've been talking about. People are not keeping up with their debt. So Canadian mortgage debt explodes, point of no return 2 years ago. 50% of Canadians face insolvency. So it keeps going. Canadians are drowning in debt 5 years ago. So this is something that we've been talking about on the channel. And we've been talking about the death of the big city by 2020, 5 years ago. Housing supply demand, government out of housing, start patrolling our borders. Because if we start actually patrolling our borders and stop depending on foreign investing to build our economy, we wouldn't be in this position we are today. Economy too dependent on real estate 5 years ago. New Zealand housing severely unaffordable 5 years ago. Paris vacant home crisis 5 years ago. So there it is right there. We've been talking about this for a long time. And entitlement, what are we talking about? See if there's anything here. Australian economy, too dependent on housing. Housing powder keg. Vancouver disappearing middle class. Here comes China. And there it is, more and more and more. 40 renters to one home. You guys are seeing that it doesn't take an Oxford major, an Oxford top of the line person to tell you that things weren't going right all these years. It took a very illiterate Portuguese like me to come and tell you guys this all these years and making something of it and trying to warn people that, look, it's 23 times your annual income to put a down payment on a house. This is not normal. The same house that sold in Vancouver for $2.6 million that was built after World War II that needs a new foundation and pretty much needs to be rebuilt, you could buy the same house in Mobile, Alabama for 40 grand with more land. Or you could buy the same house in South Carolina or in Georgia for 50, 60 grand for the same home. And that's the problem. Why? Because areas like that, wages are in line with the price of housing. Now, we've been bought out years ago before the you-know-what. And now it's coming to butt us back in the butt. And this is going to be the epic, proportionate, the biggest, not unproportionate. It's going to be so big that it's going to affect everybody. So when people say, oh, I don't own housing, Mike, that's why I never watch your videos. Well, if you're renting, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It's going to affect every single human being. And that's why all our major cities here in Canada, that's why we turn to Canafornia. That's why Canada's pretty much California, right? And that's why Amerifornia, I've been mentioning it many times, America turning into California after the Biden selection. Anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Look forward to reading your comments. This is going to affect every person in the country, and it's going to affect every foreign investor that invested in this country. And then you got BlackRock and Blackstone and all those companies out there ready to buy up our real estate at pennies on the dollar. So let's see what happens. Let's see. Our governments put us in this mess. They weren't protecting our borders. They were basically soliciting to rich foreign investors so badly that China had to put capital flows on their country 6 years ago because so much wealth was leaving Chinese shores that the Chinese government had to put a stop to it because money was flowing through here, and the people, homeowners, got wealthy on paper, while people just that were 10 years old watching my videos 10 years ago are now 20. You see what I'm saying now? It's moving forward. It's not going to stop. It's going to keep moving forward, and this problem will not get. This problem will not. It will not. It's not going to go away. Something's going to happen, and something big is going to happen. You know what they did 2 years ago? How they slowed things down, and you know what? Now let's look forward and see what this Frankenstein monster they created and how it's going to affect us, and what they're going to tax us to death, and they're going to keep inflation is going to keep running rampant unless there's a major correction ahead. Like that's the only way out. Anyways, I'm talking too much. Mike Martin's here. I have spoken.